So yeah, so I was going to comment about something that Michael said last week, and I thought it was appropriate, or at least that I thought it was insightful. Do you remember we were talking about goals, and you said, "Are they really goals?" Which was an interesting question, you know, to the point. Um, so I was going to talk about that, and so one of the things that I was talking about was I had a few things I was working on, right? One of them was trying to find an agent to find a publisher for my book. Another one was I popped into this car dealership, seeing if they were interested in me doing some training for them, right? And another one I think was the fact that I'm making this, supposedly making this movie. I have a producer that we decided to do this, basically my one man play, turn that into a movie, right? And so at some point Michael said, and I thought it was a very insightful thing, but are they really goals, or are they just things that you're playing around with, something like that? And I thought, well, yeah, that's a good point. So I said, well, to me they're goals because I'm taking steps towards them, right? So they're kind of in that, like I separate in my system here, I separate dreams from goals, right? A dream is like something that you might want, something that you'd want if you had the opportunity. That's a dream. Take a trip around the world, whatever. And then there's goals. Goals are things that you decide they're important enough to you that you're going to decide to achieve it or to experience it. So that's the difference. Is it a decision, and do you have a plan, and are you working your plan? So I said, well, they are goals. They're kind of, they're kind of in that place where they're goals and they're dreams at the same time, but they are goals in the sense that I do have a strategy and I am taking steps towards them. But it made me think about, where did they come from? These ideas, these dreams or these goals, right? And I think probably the origin was thinking about Benjamin Hardy 10xing your life. His ideas about 10xing your life, right? So I started thinking about, well, what would it be like if I 10xed my life? How much money would I make, and what would I do, and that sort of thing. And so I played around with that for a few weeks, and I wrote down a few things, did a little brainstorming on it. And I think from that, I came up with these ideas, have my movie produced, find a publisher for my book, have the book on the New York Times bestseller list, and get some corporate clients that are paying me, tens of thousands of dollars a month or a year, to train them, do some staff training. So that's where those ideas came from, and I think they're all very valid. And so what I noticed was that my attitude about doing that shifted, because now I feel like it'd be fun to do that. It'd be nice to have a corporate client that was paying me 20 grand a year to do a seminar every month for their staff, something like that, right? Or it'd be nice to have a publisher for my book. So I took a course on how to find a publisher, and so I have a strategy now about how to do that. So I'm working on that one, looking for an agent, right? And so one of the things that happened this week, and I'll tell you about it. What I've noticed about these things, these goals, let's say, they all would sort of trigger each other, right? In other words, if I found a publisher for the book and it happened to make it to the New York Times bestseller list and get a lot of publicity and sold a whole bunch of copies, that would trigger corporate clients, right? It would also trigger opportunities to turn it into a movie, right? Or if I get this movie produced and it happened to be out there on TV and people watched it, that might get some corporate clients. That might introduce me to a publisher, right? So they all were kind of different level ideas that are related, right? And so this week I was thinking about, hey, I should get on Joe Rogan. You know, did you see the video that I posted a couple days ago on the last video?
I didn't get a chance to watch that one.
Well, watch it if you can. It's only 8 minutes long, I think.
I have not been the same since we had lunch. You explained to me there are ideas percolating that the fabric of space-time might be woven by wormholes that connect the virtual particle pairs that come in and out of existence. And that if they're connected by wormholes, rather than just some field, then the wormhole is an actual structural texture of the universe.
Yeah. In fact, the other way.
Now I'm sorry.
What?
First of all, I need some weed to even deal with this.
I have not been the same since we had lunch.
So let's go through the book. But what happened was I was watching Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? Your astrophysicist, your favorite astrophysicist, or your personal astrophysicist. That's what he calls himself, right? And he was having a conversation on there with Brian Greene, who's a well-known mathematician and a cosmologist, right? Talking about the fabric of the universe. And so what they were talking about was the fact that what the scientists are now thinking about and talking about is that the universe is made up of a whole series of wormholes with virtual particles connected through time and through space with wormholes. And these wormholes are really what holds the universe together. Well, that's exactly what my book's about, you know, because I started off thinking about this dream I had when I was a kid. And how can I explain that dream? How could it possibly make sense that I could have a dream about something in the future and it started to come true? And a couple of the things I thought in my dream, they actually came true by accident, like marrying an Asian woman and becoming a university professor. You know, both of those things happened literally just by a fluke. You know, I didn't intend to go to China. I didn't intend to find a woman when I was there. I didn't, you know, I'd given up on the idea of becoming a university professor because I was in the, you know, master's PhD program, and I bailed out because I was in a car accident and ran out of money, went through a divorce. And so I said, okay, forget it. That's the end of my academic, you know, aspirations, right? And then suddenly when I was in China, as I explained, by a fluke, you know, I became a university professor. So it's like, what? How did that happen? You know, so my efforts to explain that dream, where I saw myself at 32 when I was 10, that led me to studying quantum physics and the idea that Einstein said the laws of time and the laws of space are mirror images of each other. They're more, you know, they're identical. What's true about space and what is true about time. So that was my first insight into, you know, what if thinking is a connection? Like, what if that dream was a connection? So if I was 32 remembering being 10, if rather than thinking about it like a mental snapshot or like a photo album of my past, which is how I used to think about memory and the way most people think about memory, what if it's a connection through time? You know, Einstein said what's true about space is true about time. Well, what's true about space? One thing that's true about space is information goes through it, right? We have rovers on Mars now that are sending us information. We've never been there, but we have a ton of information about Mars because the two places are connected through space, through the electronics, right? Same as a phone call. so that was the beginning of me using what the scientists are saying about physics. Hey, Phil,
Hi.
still up in the
There's-
far north, I see.
Yes, I am. Yeah. I just got back from the far north where we were in the blueberry fields.
That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
I brought some to share.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So I was just talking about this video that I put together this week. I just uploaded it to my YouTube channel, so you'll have a chance to see it. I sent you a link to it this morning, in fact, in that Facebook Messenger group. So
Great.
basically what I was saying was that I started thinking about the laws of physics and space travel to be a metaphor for thinking being time travel, right? And so that's what I've been working on now, this idea that thinking is time traveling, your mind is a time machine, that when you're thinking of the past, you're connected to it. When you're thinking of a goal, you're connected to it, and you can get information through time. So thinking is information traveling through time, right? And so I'm watching on YouTube, one of these videos popped up on my YouTube feed, and it was Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about wormholes connecting virtual particles as being the thing that's holding the universe together. Well, that's what my entire book is about. The fact that your mind is a time machine, information passes through time. When you think of the past, it's a virtual reality because it's not physical anymore. And the information, it travels through time into the present and you pick it up. We call that remembering something, right? And when you set a goal, like I set a goal last year going to England, it was a virtual reality for me. I just imagined going to England and I set a goal and I went there and eventually I was there. And I could remember being in Victoria setting the goal, right? So this whole idea of the imagination being a wormhole, thoughts being virtual realities, there's a whole series of parallel realities. All of these ideas I borrowed from physics. And I say, this is the way the mind works. So I don't say this in the book, but basically what I'm saying is, when the scientists are looking at the mathematics of quantum physics, they are really describing the mind. That's kind of my underlying theme, right? So that's what so these guys, Neil deGrasse Tyson and Brian Greene, two scientists. One guy's a cosmologist and the astrophysicist, and the other guy's a mathematician and a theoretical physicist. They were talking about now their latest ideas is that virtual particles pop in and out of existence. They're connected by wormholes across time and space. And this is what the universe seems to be. Well, this is what I talk about in chapter 10 of my book. So I made that video that I just mentioned there, sort of in response to that conversation between Brian Greene and Neil deGrasse Tyson. And I thought, I should be on Joe Rogan talking about this. They'd love it, because both those guys have been on the Joe Rogan show, right? And so, but the interesting thing was, and this is what I was talking about, Phil, just before you popped in, that having an idea, it can feel good or can feel not good, right? And so I've probably had the idea I should go on Joe Rogan, at least for the last year or so, maybe the last 2 years, the idea has popped into my head. And instantly it was accompanied by a feeling that was kind of like, why would he want me on? Why would he ever want me on his show, Joe Rogan, right? Well, what happened this week, and it was a consequence, I think, of me spending the last 3 months thinking, what if I 10x my life? What if I had a corporate client that was paying me $200,000 a year? What if I had a best-selling book on the New York Times bestseller that was selling 1 million copies? What if I had the story of my life made into a movie, and it was shown on Netflix, right? And that idea of potentially bringing in millions of dollars, became more and more and more comfortable, right, to me. Because now I have like 3 or 4 or 5 different ways I can say, well, if this happens, I'll make $1 million. If this happens, I'll make $1 million. If this happens, I'll make $1 million. So suddenly the idea of going on Joe Rogan and selling, $1 million worth of books is like, fuck, of course, it's a natural, right? So suddenly the idea of going on the Joe Rogan show shifted from being like, that would never happen, to being like, hey, wait a second, that's kind of how I felt about Coast to Coast AM. And I got on there, and look what's happened. I've been on there 6 times, and, according to Greg, I'm one of their favorite guests, So I thought, why not go on Joe Rogan? And if I were on Joe Rogan, theoretically, I could get a publishing deal for my book. I could get a movie producer financing to make the movie. I could get a bunch of corporate clients. I'm sure Brian Greene and Neil deGrasse Tyson, they got more corporate speaking gigs lined up than they can shake a stick at, So all of it's kind of clicked into place there. And so that was a little long-winded answer to what Michael said last week. Are these really goals? And so they are kind of pieces of a larger goal, if that makes sense, Michael. Like they might all happen simultaneously, It's like Michael Caine, when he was working in the butter factory, thinking about acting in movies, nobody else had that thought except him. He didn't know anybody who was an actor, and it seemed totally ridiculous, but he hung in there. And 12 years later, when he got the part in the movie Zulu, and then he got the Alfie, and then he got the role in the Ipcress Files. Suddenly, within a couple of years, he was like an internationally known movie star, making $1 million a picture. So I was thinking, hey, maybe it's time for me. Go on the Joe Rogan Experience with Neil deGrasse Tyson and Brian Greene and Anthony Hamilton talking about, your mind is a time machine,
So have you asked Joe Rogan to go on his show?
Yeah, I wrote to them.
Okay.
I said I have a video that I just made with Brian Greene and Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about my book. Me talking about the book, not them, but my book talking about the same ideas that they were discussing. And I mentioned, I've been on Coast to Coast AM a number of times, So
Interesting. It'd be interesting.
I'm not necessarily expecting them to write me back and say, come on the show. But at least I sent them an initial.
Well, why not? Why not let him expect to call you? Why set it up that he won't call you?
Well, I'm not saying I'm expecting it, but I mean,
what I meant, it's easy.
I'm open to it. Let me put
you're
it that
open
way.
to it, so shift
I'm open
your
to
perspective.
it.
Yeah, you're open to him call you.
He has a producer, right?
Yeah, well, the person I wrote to, I assume, was his sort of talent coordinator or something, because he probably gets more emails,
What you might do also is to document, if you knew all the people who have been on Coast to Coast, see how many of those people have been on the Joe Rogan show or one of his competitors.
Right. Well, I've written to Neil deGrasse Tyson a couple times, no answer. I haven't written to Brian Greene yet, but I've written to lots of people about my book, and so far, none of them have really been interested in even looking at it.
Well, I would say, one of the things I'm thinking as you're saying that is that I think all these periodicals and web pages and media as well are all looking for content. And I wouldn't probably invite you on to talk about riding motorcycles or bikes or something like that.
Right.
But in this area, I'd say you're an expert. And so I'd say that there's very few people that are an expert in this. I mean, you've got different credentials, university degree, and you've also been on Rogan. Who's the other author that you talked about that's pretty prominent? That's kind of
there's a guy named Graham Hancock that I watch a lot.
No, that you did a talk
with. He's been on the show, but I don't.
No, you did a talk with him one-on-one. I'm sure thinking your pedigree.
You're thinking of Joe Vitale?
Joe Vitale. For Joe Vitale, there's another resume reference.
Yeah,
mean,
well, I looked online. I asked my friend Google, how do I get on the on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, right? So you do a Google search for that and you come up with all kinds of stuff. Well, one of the things that came up was this guy talking about how he got on Joe Rogan. And basically what he did was he found a bunch of people that were on Joe Rogan and asked if they would introduce him to Joe Rogan. I'll have to write to Joe Vitale and say, hey, have you ever been on Joe Rogan? Or maybe do a search and see if he's been on Joe Rogan, because he's really the only person that I have any kind of connection to. And I wrote to another lady who's doing research, which I would love to be a part of. She's at the U of A in Alberta, right? She's doing MRI studies with people in memory. And so I wrote to her and I got an automatic reply back saying, I'm not accepting any emails for the next year because I'm on sabbatical for a year from the 1st of July. So bad timing there, but one of these days, it'll probably happen, right? If I keep banging away at it. So, but what I was going to say, Michael, was that getting on the Joe Rogan podcast is a goal now. So I'm going to continue to pursue that and see if I can get on. And, I can, the old past successes list, right? I've done it before. I've got on Coast to Coast. That took me 2 years to get on there. And it's paid off. So we'll see. I mean, who knows? I haven't checked my email today. There might be an email from Joe Rogan saying, hey, I listened to your Coast to Coast podcast and I want to have you on. When can you come to LA?
Definitely.
But it's like the Michael Caine thing, right? If he hadn't met the producer who was making the movie Zulu, who gave him a role in the movie, and the movie hadn't been a big hit, and that catapulted him to do Alfie and the Ipcress File, he might never have made it either, right? So basically knocking on doors, is kind of the name of the game here for me. And, you have an agent, Michael, so, you've got somebody at least in your corner, looking for roles for you.
I think you need the more irons you have in the fire, the more chances you take. I think the better your odds go up. I think there's a statistical possibility each time you put something out, 3%, 2%, 1%, that it's going to land. And if you put 100 or 200 efforts like that out there, I think you might find you get it. I know that Canfield, the reason I brought up Canfield is Canfield, this book talks, I think right in the foreword or the beginning, talks about how many people he approached. I think he's famous for having, sent out 600 or 500 copies or approaches, and he was turned down. Then all of a sudden now he became super wealthy and his ideas were proliferated all over the world.
Exactly. It's the same old story, right? I mean, Stallone was apparently turned down by 1,000 people when he approached them to make Rocky, and I think Canfield, if I remember, he approached 147 different publishers and was turned down by all of them.
And being called crazy.
Until finally, one of them said, yeah, we'll try it,
I think all new ideas are crazy, right?
Yeah, I think so. At first they're ridiculed, right? And then they're laughed at, and then they're ridiculed, and then finally they're accepted, But it's funny, I was thinking yesterday that, you can go to school and you can study divinity, right?
Yeah.
You can get a PhD.
Career profession.
You can get a PhD in divinity, right? Which is the study of God. Well, what is God? It's an idea. There may not be any, God. It might be a fantasy, you know what I mean? But you could probably get a PhD in studying Harry Potter too, if you wanted to. And so it occurred to me when I was doing this video yesterday, finishing up this video about how much my book is similar to what Neil deGrasse Tyson and Brian Greene were talking about in terms of quantum physics. It occurred to me that what the physicists are doing, describing the universe, neutrinos, wormholes, dark energy, dark matter. It sounds a lot like theologians in the Middle Ages talking about how many archangels are there and how many how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. It seems ludicrous now to think that people used to have that as a serious topic of discussion, right? I mean, it may turn out that all these neutrinos and, Higgs boson particles, they're all fantasy. None of them are real, They're all just a product of some mathematical calculation that somebody put together. But then that's my thesis, basically, is that your ideas can become real, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I get on Joe Rogan, I'll definitely tell you about it.
All right. Give us a little warning. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Gentlemen, I have to leave right now.
Yeah, good luck
Yeah.
with your eye, Michael. You just had surgery, right?
Yeah, well, it's the cold that I'm dealing with. It's bugging me. But anyway, it's all good. But I thank you, gentlemen, for showing the meeting. Got a lot out of it. And I'm
Great.
going across to this seniors home across the street. And what Bruce brought up with me is, when work with the seniors, like, what I get up, I have my day, I'm going to die. What kind of life have I got? So,
Right.
create the communication with these seniors and create something with them to see if they can become more alive. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, I'm doing it as a bit of an experiment. I mean, I
Yeah.
enjoy doing it because I enjoy talking to people about
Yeah,
this, and I must say they've been very welcoming so
Yeah.
far.
Yeah.
But I don't have any illusions about they're going to, adopt my point of view and actually use the past successes list. If some of them do, that's fine. This one lady on Thursday said she really liked my talk and she was really intrigued about it. But it's just me out there doing my thing.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
All right.
Okay.
We would love to have you join us in this online community for $1 a day. You get your own PDF copy of the book upon which this entire training series is based, along with 2 powerful meditation visualization recordings. You also get a free copy of this Design Your Life workbook and a 4-hour video course that tells you how to use it to change your life step by step. You get lifetime access to all of this on day 1, and you can cancel your registration at any time. Just go to mindtimeandpower.com and click the link to join the online community.